Welcome back to Leaders Live. How's everybody doing today? Happy Tuesday. We got a great show lined up today with Cindy Sykes, co-founder of Blck VC. Just want to say check in right now as you log on, you see the stream, put down your name, throw a link to your site, whatever you're working on, use that comment bar in YouTube, LinkedIn, or whatever it is to really connect with each other and make comments throughout this. So if we get some good gems out of Sydney, which I think we will, I know we will, make a comment of it so we could clip that and then reshare it and then continue to kind of circulate this through the internet. Before we get started, again, why are we doing this? We want to understand how the best founders and venture funds are operating. Once we understand that, we can connect them with like-minded business leaders and then hopefully help them grow. I'm helping them grow, I'm helping you grow, obviously all synergistically aligned, and then we could, grow together. So without further ado, let's start off with our sponsor, Entre, Michael Mara, CEO. A few words, Mike. Welcome.
What's up, Charlie? I'm excited for another episode and edition of Leaders Live. Sydney's an amazing person, founder and investor. We were lucky enough to have her on our pitch competition last month, and she gave a lot of great advice for the founders pitching, and it was awesome. So I'm excited to hear more about her story and go into her background a little bit more. For those of you that are just joining us, or this is your first event or live stream, please, as Charlie mentioned, ask some questions, introduce yourself wherever you're watching, whether it's LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever. And if you haven't already, we do have the app live, so you can jump into our community. You can meet a ton of other like-minded people, entrepreneurs, investors, developers. We just rolled out our job postings feature, so you can post a co-founder position or freelance position, or you can apply and join other cool startups and whatnot on the app or just on our website at joinentre.com. And I will be staying on in the background. I'm going to let Charlie do his thing with Sydney, and I'll be keeping track of all the comments and stuff that are going down, and we'll do a Q&A at the end. So if you have questions for Sydney throughout the interview, just let us know.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
You got it, Charlie.
Have you on. So without further ado, let's bring in Cindy Sykes, co-founder of Blck VC. How are you?
I'm good. I'm surviving. I'm 5 months into quarantine and still alive and healthy, so doing pretty good.
That is positive. That's all positive stuff. You got a lot of cool stuff going on. We're going to talk a lot about Blck VC. We're going to talk about mentorship, growing your business and diverse leadership, everything under the sun. But definitely want to mention again, check in the comments. I see the Cedars Ranch just checked in. So we're going to be giving, some props to people who are checking in as well and asking questions for Sydney, which we'll be answering right around 3:30. So, Sydney, let's just kind of jump right in. Let's talk about you started. I mean, you were a Harvard grad, intern at MIT, working at McKinsey, all big names here. How did it all lead up? Give us a little context. What led you up to starting this community?
For sure. So yeah, like you said, I kind of had a bunch of big names on the resume. I knew I was interested in helping companies, but wasn't sure exactly what that meant. So when I was in college, I did my internships at McKinsey, thought that was interesting, but still wanted to be more hands-on with companies, exploring around. And that's ultimately what led me to my career in venture. Started out at NEA in 2016, doing early consumer investing. Really loved thinking about what are the futures of industries and businesses. How does venture capital change and shape our economy and create so many companies and great entrepreneurs? So that was all really exciting for me, but was obviously and blatantly aware of how much of a bubble venture capital was. It's $100+ billion industry, assets under management now. And only 3% of those investors are Black. We've got, of course, underrepresentation of women and other minorities, but it needs to be changed because it's such an impactful industry on our economy. And so that led me to start Blck VC with my co-founder, Frederick Gross, with the goal of empowering and supporting Black investors while increasing diversity in venture. And we've been working on that for the past 3.5 or so years. And it's been incredible to bring our community together and create this support system, but also to draw attention to the issues that we think are really important.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned 3% of Black investors in venture capital. It doesn't even sound real, to be honest.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about the U.S. population. That isn't the same in really any other industry.
No, it's absolutely wild. But talk about the community that you're building, right? So you're connecting, engaging, empowering, and advancing Black venture investors. How are you doing that? You know, how are you putting together? I see you got a great board and everything, but kind of walk us through kind of what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So like I mentioned, venture is a huge part of creating jobs, and it does that, of course, through founders. Founders are the ones who actually create the companies, who actually create the jobs. But if you don't solve the problem on the funding side, I don't think you can ever change what the future of business leaders looks like in the long term. So we've always thought about it as, how do we solve the issue of the homogenous community of investors so that there can be more diverse companies, so that communities of color can be supported and empowered financially. And so our organization is about 300 active members. Those are people in our community who are institutional investors, angel investors, aspiring investors. But then we have, in the day-to-day, we have 30 or so members of our committee leads and committee members who work on everything from partnerships with allies to help them increase their pipelines and make them more diverse, to relationships with business schools, to also our breaking into venture programs, which help aspiring investors get the knowledge and the support and comfort level they need to really be successful. And this has been such a village effort, and not just a team effort, because there have been so many people involved who have helped us get to this point. And so we've been blessed to have members of the Black investor community who really want to build this organization and make it work. So
if I'm taking it, if you're a potential investor or you're coming out of school, you want to be an investor, all the way to, you're a private equity investor or something like that. It ranges, right? So how can you support that, I guess, the kid who's coming out of school right now and trying to get his foot into the door of one of these VCs?
Yeah, it's a really tough question, because like you're saying, the venture community is really broad. You have the angel investors who, maybe have done one deal or, have money to do venture deals, but they don't know where to start. And then you have the investor who's made their career in venture and has their own fund and has been doing it for 12 or 15 years. So that's a really wide range. We've always focused on, active venture investors, as well as people looking to break into that industry. And so we kind of just always come back to, what is our community asking for and what do they need? I personally went through the whole process of, one, trying to get into venture, and then after that, once I'm in venture, figuring out how do I swim in this giant ocean of challenges. And it's all about support and community. So for me, I wouldn't have gotten into NEA. I wouldn't have gotten to be an angel investor right now and being a scout right now if it hadn't been for the members of the Black investor community. So that's kind of the broader answer. On the tactical level, we have programming that really focuses on those different groups. So for those aspiring investors, we put together resources, but also our new Breaking into Venture program, the BIV program, which is a 7-week program that we launched a few weeks ago with a small group to beta test it. And there's several modules that each of the members and each of the candidates in that group has 2 different mentors. So it really is a bear hug. It's not meant to take individuals who don't know anything about venture and try to make them into this candidate. It's meant to say, there's incredible talent already out there. Let's support them so that they feel totally ready to get into venture. But the talent is already there. We're just kind of creating the pathway and the funnel so that they're supported and that they meet the right connections. So there's that on that end. And then we also work on how do we create community for the existing investors and ventures, doing events that helps them figure out how to be successful, that connects them with each other, and that also just empowers the community and makes it one of the strongest ones out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said the talent's out there, and you're a scout for, looking for this talent. What is some of the characteristics of the talent that you're looking for to try to bring in?
For sure. I think that's a great question. The number one thing is someone who can learn from past experiences. And that's kind of a better way of saying pattern recognition. You hear pattern recognition all the time, but what pattern recognition really is, and when I think it actually really works, is when you're able to take what you've learned from your past companies or past work experiences and apply that into understanding what makes a really strong entrepreneur and a really strong company. Seeing how certain foundational questions or business structures or approaches to a certain problem work, and then applying that to evaluating companies. And you can do that even if you haven't been an investor in the past. You can use that with any work or initiative experience you've had. Building on that, someone who is a self-starter, that's hugely important. Venture is an industry that's fairly independent. So you need to be ready to figure out what's the best way to find deals, what's the best way to help companies. If there's not an answer to a problem, how do I still approach it? And so that self-starter mentality is really big to have. And then the last thing I'll say is being able to have a supportive network and rely on your network. So building a community of people around you who you can ask the right questions to, who you want to be on boards with later, who will push for you, but also will give you their honest opinion of when you're wrong on an investment. At the end of the day, the people around you are going to be the reason you make it.
So you're talking about looking at deals and understanding, what deals are good. I mean, you're an angel investor right now in some consumer, when someone's pitching you or you're looking at a deck, what stands out to you? Again, we're part with the Entre group, which a lot of entrepreneurs, startup founders, probably looking to raise capital along the line. So, when talking to someone like you, you obviously could give us a little bit of insight on what works, especially for you. So, can you give us a little bit of drop a little knowledge here? Yeah,
that insight, because it'll come back to me in good deals. One of the big things I think about is how well, since I do mostly consumer investing, how well do you know your customer? There's been a period of time in the past where investors have focused so much on what is the largest target audience, what is the largest TAM? But I think it's really important these days when we're in this era of people being introspective, thinking about the companies they want to support and what those companies do, that who your customer is and what you're offering to a very specific level, so that you can relate to your customer on just a higher level than any basic brand that's out there. Another thing I think is really important is how are you approaching the problem? And of course, that's very general and broad, but there's only so many problems in the world. And it's about how you find a solution to that problem that really differentiates yourself. Now, so for example, if there is something that the banks aren't doing, so there's a huge underbanked population in the US. I think most people know about that. Anyone in fintech understands that. So come to me and say, I'm trying to service the underbanked. Well, why isn't JP Morgan going to do that? Why isn't Bank of America going to do that? And then you can say, well, I've actually found this loophole that allows me to target customers that they can't, or I've found, through these surveys that these customers aren't being satisfied in this way, or, I've hired this person who brings in this technology. So that moat and that barrier to entry that you can bring doesn't just have to be technology. It can be a perspective. It can be a solution to a problem that's different. But the solution to the problem can't be the only thing that distinguishes you. And the last thing I'll say is now during the time of COVID, it's really important to understand how are you pivoting. There's no excuse to just say, when COVID's over, this will be the perfect product. Or now that COVID's here, this is the perfect product. You need to be able to pivot and understand what your company will look like now, what it could have looked like 7 months ago, and what it will look like in the next year or 2 years, and be ready to pivot and not being too stagnant so that you can't adjust to the times.
Yeah, that's all great tips right there. I like that a lot. You're talking about mentorship before we got on here, and I think that's very important. Can you talk about a little bit like what mentors you've had in the past have stood out to you, that maybe you've had some lessons that you take with you today, almost every day, and kind of pass them along?
Yeah, it's funny because when I was in college, I remember people talked so much about mentorship and said, find a mentor, and when I would interview with certain companies, they would say, oh, this is a company that's great with mentorship. We're going to pair you up with a mentor. And there was this idea that when you get into the workforce, you will have a mentor. It's just part of life, which I think frankly isn't true. I think you have to work to find mentors, and you have to work to build those relationships. And you can't expect it to be something that you'll have off the bat on day one. And there are people who I've known for years and years and years who have become mentors within the past few months of my life. And there's people who I've met who became a mentor kind of the first day I met them because we just clicked so well. But the number one thing I think is important about finding a mentor and building valuable relationships in general is making sure you have an understanding of what you want to get out of that relationship and what you want to build in yourself. So that doesn't mean it needs to be transactional, but understanding, hey, I'm really struggling to understand what my career path looks like, or I'm really struggling with how I find the promotion path within my company, and understanding what questions you need to solve that this person can help you with, but then also being ready to give back the other way. If that person who's mentoring you is looking to fill a role, can you provide candidates? Can you expand their network? Can you make introductions to people who would be helpful? Can you help them with research projects? So I think mentorship is a two-way street, and it's something you really need to work at to actually make it valuable.
I get so many questions because this is obviously very passionate with you.
Yeah.
Aspect of it. So who is a mentor that stood out to you and something that you really took from in that?
I've been lucky to have a few. Sarah Kunst is one. She's watching. Shout out to her. She's someone who is both a champion and a mentor and an advocate. So, she will always give me the 100% honest truth. Like, I'm looking at this deal. Tell me what you think. Okay, that's a bad deal. Or what? Not even that's a bad deal, but why didn't you ask this question? Or can you go back and figure out this? And really giving me a different perspective that she's very honest and straight to the point about is extremely valuable. But then she's also willing to be an advocate for me and a sponsor for me. And there's nothing that can replace that in a mentor. Charles Hudson is someone I hugely look up to. He's also someone who's willing to jump on the phone, willing to answer my questions whenever I'm struggling with a career move. And there's so many other people, Elliot Robinson is one of them, all of the members of our board. So I'm lucky to have a few, and just, I think the most important thing for me is if you're honest with people and you tell them what you're struggling with and what questions you have, you can find a lot of mentors in places you wouldn't expect.
Well, it's interesting. It's the communication aspect of it. It seems like even what you're saying, it's understanding what you're trying to achieve, communicate with somebody who potentially is a mentor, even if they're not going to be, maybe they can direct you to the right person.
Sure.
But
funny,
I guess
when I was in undergrad, I feel like I heard people say, like, go up to someone and you ask them to be a mentor, and then they are your mentor. And I don't think that really is mentorship. I think, like you're saying, it's about asking the questions and making it something you're able to learn from the relationship.
Do you have, I never asked this question before, but it's interesting. You've mentioned a few mentors. Do you have like a set number, like, 5 mentors that you can handle, or, or is it just like whatever comes in and then we can build a good relationship, the more the better?
I think it depends on your mentorship and mentee style. I don't talk to all of my mentors. It's not like I have an hour on my calendar every week with my mentors. It's more of like, kind of one-off, hey, I'm thinking about this. And that doesn't mean I don't talk to them every week, because I probably do, but most of the conversations are, a text or an email conversation. And then once in a while I'll jump on the phone and it's an hour and a half. So I think you don't need to limit it, but you'll probably find people you end up gravitating towards more. So if you have 10 mentors, it's pretty likely that only that 3 of them will be the people you really want advice from. And maybe that's not true for everyone, especially if you're balancing different things. But if you were to take me, for example, most of my mentors are in venture, but I could really benefit from having a mentor who's worked in the nonprofit space, and I would come to them for different questions than I would someone who's been an angel investor in the past, and I would talk to them about different things than people I would talk to about fashion or branding. So it's important to have people in your life who, have experiences that you haven't had yet and be able to go to them. But there's no limit to what that looks like. But probably over time, as you figure out who you click with and what you're most interested in and the issues that you struggle with will change, you're going to find that those people will narrow and narrow.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's one of the past guests actually said that they had a mentor that was a millennial 20 years younger or something like that, helping them with social media. So it's just something that opened my mind. It was like, oh yeah, okay. I guess you could break it down in different sectors of whatever you're working on. So
for sure.
We're going to be taking the questions at like 3:30 or so. So definitely start submitting some questions for Cindy. But before we get into that, we'd like to talk about a little bit of partnerships and collaborations. What makes a good partner in your mind? And, what gives an example of a partnership that's worked in the past?
Sure. Do you mean a partnership with another organization or a partnership with a person?
I think either or. I mean, kind of what you're looking for right now too. Like, so I'm trying to understand what has worked, and then maybe partnerships that you're looking for in the future.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll talk about it in 2 kind of different ways, because I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs on the call. I, for the longest time, really didn't think about myself as a founder, and Blck VC is a nonprofit, so I think of it definitely differently than the way I think about the startups that I look at. But regardless, it's so important to find a co-founder and a partner that you can work with well. And I've been so lucky to have found Fred, and we work super well together. We've been working on this for the past 3.5 years. And just, I think the key thing is there, not just communication, but finding someone who can pick up your slack. So one of the great things about Frederick and I is we can kind of touch base and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Can you pick it up? And being honestly able to say yes or no, but always being willing to help that other person. So in terms of that kind of co-founder partnership, I'd say that is huge. And then in terms of partnerships with other organizations, the most important thing for us has been just figuring out sort of goals and intentionality. So of course, we want to know that the organizations that are interested in working with us fundamentally understand the importance of diversity, that it can make companies stronger, that it can make investments stronger, that it pays out in dollars down the line. And you can't really, or it's very hard to convince someone that that is true. And there's already so many partners out there who understand that. So we look for that intentionality. But then also goals, like, do you want to make your pipeline of investment opportunities more diverse? Do you want to make your candidates of potential investors down the line more diverse? Or do you want to cover your butt and make sure you're immune from criticism? Because obviously we're not there for that. And we always try to find organizations that our goals are aligning. And also we want to find organizations to partner with who, again, make up for our slack. There's so many great, smart people working on diversity issues and improving equity in venture and improving venture capital as a whole, that there's really no need to duplicate efforts and to end up having multiple people working on the same problem at once. So whenever we can find someone who's working on a problem that we care about, we try to partner up with them and support them, but let them take the lead. And then we try to do the reverse when there's something that we're working on that we think other organizations can support us with.
Is there an ideal collaborator or partner that you're trying to achieve right now that maybe you could throw into the into the world right now, so that we could maybe I could try to connect you with one of my connections, or somebody watching right now could connect you.
One thing we're really interested in is the data about the venture capital industry has been really not great. There's a few organizations that have worked on this. We have the NVCA with Deloitte, and they've been, they've probably done some of the most comprehensive work, but most of their work has been focused on the NVCA members. We have, Harvard Business School has done several studies about the diversity in dollars and founders in the industry, and there are a couple other nonprofits there as well. But I think if there, right now we're thinking about, is there a right university or other data partner we could collaborate with to get the true source of what does diversity look like in venture capital, and how does it affect funding dollars? How does it affect the experience of raising a fund? So all of these questions come back to the validity and accuracy of the data, and that's something that really needs to be solved.
Okay. That's solid. I like that a lot. Giving me marching orders right now, and giving me direction.
Yeah.
Good. It's good.
Please come back and solve this for me.
Yeah, no problem. I got it. I got it. In my mind.
I've only been working on it 3 years. You've got it.
Before we do the Q&A, networking aspect, how do you look at networking? I mean, you talked about mentorship, you talked about new business, but how do you look at building a new network, or do you just look at a real tight-knit, solid community of good people, and how do you stay in touch with them?
I think it's important to do both. I am someone who pretty much never turn down an introduction when it comes through someone else. I admittedly don't keep up with all of the cold outreach from my email and LinkedIn, but if someone says, I think you should meet this person, they're really smart, or they're really nice, or they're working on this issue they need your help with, I pretty much always take that intro. You also never know when someone can come into your life who's going to be really, really valuable. So always be open to the introduction. Take as many as you can. If you're really young in your career and you're not getting a ton of those intros, make sure you ask for them when you meet someone. Say, hey, Charlie, do you know anyone who's doing consumer angel investing? I'm really looking to make a few more investments. Or do you know anyone who's worked at NEA in the past? Can I talk to them? So I think it's important to be proactive about your network. But that being said, saying about the quality of connecting with the people you already work with, that's huge. I mean, you can't people will feel the disingenuousness of being transactional. And so if you only talk to someone when, you hear about a deal they've done that you want to get into, they will start to notice that trend. But that doesn't mean you have to hit someone up every Tuesday and say, hey, how are you? And it can be, I saw your post on LinkedIn, really loved it, congrats on that. Or, I saw you made a new move, or, I saw you're working with this person I've met before. You can make that a natural conversation the way you would keep up with any one of your friends, and try to focus again on making it a value add, and not being transactional.
Right. No, absolutely. The authentic way to go about it, I think, is absolutely right. And, just a little plug, I'm an office leasing broker. I told you that before. I help companies find new office space. I'm not trying to push office space down their throat, especially in these times. I'm trying to help, founders connect with other founders, find funds, find other ways. Like you said, like their post on LinkedIn, send them an article that may be of interest. But again, that value add is huge.
Yeah, and Charlie, that's the way that you're then the first person they think of when they are leasing, because you're already actively in their lives. So they're going to be thinking about you in the back of their head when they start thinking about, should we be getting an office?
Hopefully, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Let's bring in Mike. For the Q&A portion here. Mike, how you doing?
What's up? I'm loving this. And the last thing you just said about being genuine and authentic, and I think it's so huge. And one of the biggest things that I've noticed right now on how people can do this, especially, with everything going on, you do not want to be super salesy, transactional, like you're talking about. It's almost taking things a layer deeper, provide value and get to actually know somebody. And if they know who you are and know what you do, eventually there's probably going to be something that you'll be able to like, they'll hire you for or bring you on and whatnot. And the more people you know like that, and just building like actual genuine relationships, I think is so key. So I'm really glad you guys brought that up. The other thing too about the stats on investing, I think is huge. And I think the biggest problem right now is there's so much private industry. There's so much huge money going into it, and they can keep financials and data and information so, private and low key. You know what I mean? I think it's really hard, and we're doing this actually. We're going to be coming out with like a big like report on the entrepreneur industry, because I think it's really hard to actually know how many entrepreneurs there are and how broad this industry actually is. So we've put together like a whole thing on and researching all these different markets and stuff that I think is going to be a really cool thing for a lot of people to look at, not just investing. But let's get on to some of these questions. I just wanted to bring up those two things because I thought they were awesome, and I'm really glad that you guys brought them up. So we have a question here from Caleb. I'm not sure if you went into detail with this, but what's the best way for people to maybe get in touch with you if they think it's a good fit for what they're building? And do you have any specialties? I know you mentioned consumer. Do you have any geographical areas that you're looking to invest in and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll just clarify something up front. So Blck VC is a nonprofit focused on supporting investors and increasing diversity in venture. So Blck VC itself doesn't have a fund. All of our members and all of the members of our leadership are active investors. Frederick, B2B investor with Storm Ventures, the members of our board. We have Ernest Sweat, Adina, Brian as well. All of them are investors also. And for me personally, I invest generally seed and pre-seed, angel rounds also. Geographic area, not important. I tend to do the Bay Area just because that's where my network's based, but the US is kind of fine for me. I want it to be someone I can see eventually. So US is important to me. But geographic area, I think, is not really a concern. As far as for Blck VC, we have chapters in LA, in New York, in the Midwest, and we're expanding to Atlanta and the DMV and other areas as well. So we can help the investors in those regions really, strengthen their communities. And then, of course, our main chapter would be in San Francisco, where we started it.
Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I think that's really important for people to understand too. But not only if you and I love that we're doing this because you're just such a great person to know in the startup community, especially for underrepresented founders. Because even if it's not a good fit for you, you might be able to put them in touch with somebody else that could at least even give them some insights or point them in the right direction with everything going on right now. So we have another thing here for new founders looking for angel investors, right? It's generally speaking the first, external capital that is put into a company. Maybe they go into an accelerator, but do you have any insights or good advice for new founders, maybe first-time founders, on talking to angel investors or how they should approach angel investors? Should they have traction already? Should they have revenue or something going, or is it different case by case?
The angel investor question is really important. It can be very challenging for entrepreneurs to find angel investors, especially if it's the first capital in. A lot of times you may not have a ton of angel investors in your community or in your immediate network. So I think if you don't have any angel investors in your network, building up a presence online, promoting yourself on Twitter, trying to get press out there or a social media presence wherever possible. And obviously that works a lot better for a lot of consumer companies than for enterprise companies. If you do have any friends of friends, family friends, whatever it is, who are angel investors or high net worth individuals, I think it's really important to talk to them, even if they're not actively investing, because they are more likely to know other angel investors and be able to create those connections. I think the angel round is tough because, like I said, it's not available to everyone. So wherever possible, applying to grants and accelerators and incubators. Those incubators and accelerators and programs all have incredible networks, and they can really help introduce you to other founders who have been through what you're doing, other angel investors, potential advisors. That advisor network as well can turn into angel investors. In terms of when you're having the conversation, it goes pretty similarly to how other investment conversations would go. I think it's really important to have a deck ahead of time to understand how much money you want to raise and why, to understand what you think the value of the company is now and down the line. What does your target audience look like? What problem are you solving? How do you compare to other competitors in the space? And then also to get advice, because frankly, unfortunately, most angel investors are probably going to say no. Angel investors only do a few investments a year, but still making sure you maintain that relationship that we've been talking about, that's so key, and using this relationship to make your company even stronger, even if that doesn't include capital, I think is the best outcome you can get when you've gotten a no.
Sorry, we were clicking myself off there. But no, I think that's fantastic advice. And I think there's two things there that I want to highlight too. You mentioned just building the relationship with wealthy people, even in your city or wherever that may be, because generally speaking, rich people know other rich people. So,
yeah.
So same thing with you. Like if you might not be a good fit for this company, but that doesn't mean that they don't know this other guy who's a perfect fit for your industry and your business, right? So I think that's huge. The second thing, is, and I didn't really realize this until last year, but Twitter is very low-key tech and VC heavy. I honestly don't understand how VCs spend so much time on Twitter, because it blows my mind how active they are on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I used to, I didn't really mess with Twitter until I realized this, and I was like, wow.
Same.
Like, out here, this is where VCs hang out. This is their stomping grounds. So if you're not on Twitter and you're building a tech startup, definitely get on Twitter and start interacting with people, because they will. I've had conversations with people on Twitter. I've met a lot of investors through Twitter and stuff. It's a very, you'll have more success on there than even LinkedIn or anywhere else. So we have a couple other questions here. How do you know if you should raise a seed round or a pre-seed round? I think this is a very good question too. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because I on it too, but I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a deep question that I have some strong thoughts on. I am an investor, but I don't necessarily believe that the VC route is right for most companies. There are a lot of companies that can successfully bootstrap. There are other companies that can make it work, through slow and steady growth, and then maintain a lot of the ownership of their company. So I think you really need to think about why you're raising the money. And if you're raising the money, why are you raising as much as you're raising? Because ultimately you want to take just as much as you need to grow. So if you feel like you're working on your company and you can't get to the next level without a set amount of capital, or the capital is really the number one thing holding you back, then it is time to raise a round. And then how much? If you are still trying to figure out kind of the concept phase a little bit, or trying to figure out the exact sticky market, a pre-seed round can be really good, because it can give you enough money to test out one or two ideas, or to prove out a little bit the concept that you have. So then when you take it to the seed round, you can say, we've seen the need for this product, we've seen the need for this market, for this solution, and here's why we know we're approaching it the right way. When you're raising a seed round, it's going to vary the type of what different firms consider to be a seed round. Some will say it needs to be post-revenue, some will say it needs to be pre-revenue. But I think regardless, you should be able to tell a story using a little bit of data. So if that's an app saying, these people are spending X amount of hours doing this, and it's clear that they can't find this anywhere else. If it's a product, kind of same idea. Or if it's, a B2B or a service saying, here's the customer surveys we've done, and we can see where the need is, and we can see where the holes in the space are. So I think Pre-seed is a little bit more about, you still have some questions and you need to test them out, but you can't do that without capital. And the seed is, okay, you've kind of seen the foundation for the concept being proven out, and now you need to take it to the next level, and you're ready to actually put money into that concept and prove it out. So it's a little bit more stable, a little more certain.
I think that's probably the best explanation I've ever heard for it. Honestly, I'm not even kidding. No, that was phenomenal.
I'll copyright it.
I don't even want to add anything to that because I don't want to mess it up. That was perfect. We'll definitely be using that piece for like content later for sure.
For sure.
We have another question here from Wilson. So you mentioned like getting better data into the VC diversity initiatives and everything. Are there any other things that could have an impact that you're looking for that could really help with this? I think we're going through a massive transition with a lot of different things that are going on, but especially in the startup space with investing and founders and all of this stuff. So are there any other things that you think can make a big impact that you're looking for, that you need help with, or anything like that?
For sure. I think at the end of the day, the big thing that makes the biggest difference, that's kind of our thesis, is get more investors of color able to write checks and control dollars. And so that means a lot of different things down the line. But if we're talking about low-hanging fruit, I think there are two things. One is making more Black and underrepresented minority operators or non-investors scouts. So scouts are individuals who firms will give a set amount of money to invest on behalf of the firm, and they tend to operate fairly independently. You may have heard of Sequoia Scouts, but there's quite a few other scout programs as well. Lightspeed, I think 645, there's quite a few others. And it's a great opportunity for a firm to expand their pipeline of investors and entrepreneurs, as well as for them to build relationships with someone they might want to hire as a check writing partner down the line. So I think that's kind of the low-hanging fruit of the first bucket. The second thing that makes the biggest difference is, how do we make sure these really early investors or entrepreneurs of color have the capital they need and the confidence they need to quit their jobs and put more effort into their companies? So in a lot of ways, this is referred to as the friends and family round. And the friends and family round is kind of absurd because not everyone has friends and families with a couple $1,000s lying around to invest into their business. So how do we replace that? I think that part of that is investing more dollars at the pre-seed stage, putting more dollars into accelerators, grants, incubators, just getting more money at the earliest level and kind of spreading it a bit thinner, rather than the first round that a company raises feeling like it needs to be $1 million, because a first-time entrepreneur can make $50,000 stretch really far, and that can eventually turn into a huge company. But without that early money, they may not feel comfortable quitting their job because they're just frankly not in that position. And they also may not have the confidence to know that they're heading in the right direction.
I totally agree with that. And I think that right there is something that we're really focused on, solving too with Entre, and really just leveling the playing field with entrepreneurship. The whole thing is we wanted to streamline it and make it accessible to everyone, no matter where you are, like literally location, how much money you have, whatever. That's why our platform is free, and we want to make it super, simple to like get all the basic resources you need to start and build a company. But I totally agree with you. The early stage funding, there's a huge gap. There's a few accelerators that control most of the flow at the early stages. There's a few angel groups that control the majority of it. And if you're not in those cliques or in those locations and areas and have those connections, you're kind of stuck at that very beginning stages. So I think crowdfunding is going to help a lot with this. I think that's also going to be a huge thing. Equity crowdfunding and having more people, more investors put money into that too. I think there's a lot of, as you know, with these angellist syndicates and stuff like that. I think that's going to help a lot as well. But I think there's definitely a lot of things that need help with it. But I think you're spot on, and I think there's a lot of a lot of things that you're doing and that I think we can also help with too and collaborate on. But I think these are really important things that there's a lot of people who need help, and a lot of these early stage founders are kind of out to dry on a lot of this stuff. But I want to be respectful of your time. I think I could go on forever with this, and I'm going to pass it back over to Charlie here to wrap up. If there's anything that we can help with or whatever, would love to continue continue talking and figuring out ways that we can work together to help solve some of these problems. And if anyone has any questions or thinks that we can help or whatever, you can go to joinentre.com. You can email me, just michael@joinentre.com. Happy to help, happy to chat. Always on the app too, so if you message me on there, I'll respond and everything. But thank you so much, and I'll pass it back over to Charlie to wrap up.
Thanks, Mike.
See you guys.
This has been really great. I really enjoyed this talk with you, Sydney. And I think that there's a partnership that we could form here as well. Hopefully, I could start promoting some of your community to get a little bit more diverse investors into the show. So I'm excited. And just to leave off, can you give us your words to live by, personal mantra or ethos, just to kind of get everybody, excited?
Yeah, for sure. That's deep. I think one thing I always say is check in with yourself. I think you can spend a lot of time going down a path that doesn't fit you and working in a job that you don't even love without realizing that there are things out there that you want to pursue. So for me, that was why I started Blck VC. And I was thinking about what made me happy and what I cared about. I realized it was having a supportive network of people who look like me and making sure that it was easier to get into VC and to be a successful Black investor once I venture. So, check in with yourself. Make sure that you're doing the things you care about. And if not, like what is the right approach and what do you want to do and what do you want to look towards?
That's awesome. And how can people check in with you? Is it the website, or what's the best way to contact you? Share information.
Sure. Website and Twitter. I am one of those VCs who's on Twitter. You can reach out to my LinkedIn, but I think generally Twitter is probably a better way to get a hold of me. My inbox on LinkedIn is pretty flooded. And if you do have something that you want help with, whenever you're reaching out to me, please start with a specific ask. That tends to be what I respond to. What do you need help with? What do you want to talk about? And I will always try to respond and be helpful with whatever you're asking for help with.
Amazing. I really appreciate your time. That's all we got. We're going to definitely clip the pre-seed seed advice there. I think that's a good one. We'll share it with you so we can blast it out. But thanks again. I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Lovely to have you here. Lovely to be here. Hopefully we'll connect again soon.
Yes, absolutely.